Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another Salesforce Ben webinar. This time we'll be covering Salesforce data resilience in a multi-cloud world. So in today's landscape, resilience and data integration have never been more crucial. Organizations are increasingly managing data across a variety of platforms, so Salesforce Data Cloud, Snowflake, Tableau, RDS, and so many others. But with these integrations, of course, comes some unique challenges, especially around securing and sustaining data integrity across clouds. So today we'll be exploring the latest innovations in Data Cloud from Dreamforce 2024, why AI readiness requires data readiness, and how to achieve both, and some common challenges in ensuring data resilience across platforms with some actionable best practices. So our goal for today's session is to help you build a strategy to make your data work harder and also smarter. Your speaker for today is Shyam Oza, Senior Product Marketing Manager at AvePoint. As always, I'll be back for the Q&A at the end, but for now, I will hand over to Shyam to kickstart the session.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Simon. I'm excited to be with all of you guys here today to talk about data resilience in a multi-cloud world. And the most important thing I think we want to discuss today is the reality that our data is distributed and it's going to remain distributed for some time. So it's something that we're going to have to deal with no matter how much we try to consolidate and bring things together and connect them. There's always going to be some complexity in our supply chain. And so what we'll explore after that are what are some of those risks of a complex supply chain? How are we going to be able to minimize those things and play in this multi-cloud world in a better way that reduces our risk, that allows us to implement technologies that provide layered solutions to our problems, not just kind of one-dimensional solutions. And then very, very quickly touch on AvePoint's approach to the multi-cloud problem today and in the future. So, right off the bat, this is the most important thing that we have to acknowledge is that our data is distributed, whether we want it to be or not, and it's going to stay that way for a very long time, probably forever. And it's the real next big challenge for all of us. It doesn't matter what vertical you're in, what industry you're in. There was the push to become digital. There was the push to the cloud. Now there's this push to, implement AI. But in reality, these disparate data silos and things like that are probably the biggest blocker, not just to AI implementation, but basically all of the new meaningful innovations that are coming or we're trying to roll out within our organizations. And one of the things that we've seen from a Salesforce and MuleSoft study is really that when organizations were surveyed, when leaders were surveyed, only about 28% of their applications actually have meaningful connections and deep integration. So we're not talking about things like SSO or the ability to simply iframe something or view data side by side, but to actually have the data married together in a way that I get better reporting, that I might see insights that I wouldn't have otherwise seen, that my data becomes richer with more context. These things are really missing. And we can see why. 81% of IT and decision makers are struggling with data fragmentation and data silos, right? And 95% of those leaders report that the integration is the top barrier to a successful AI implementation. So even if many people are saying AI is the problem of tomorrow or the problem we're trying to deal with today, in reality, the data isolation, the data readiness challenge, the data silos are the real barrier, not just to AI implementation, but pretty much to most digital transformation projects that are happening right now. And, don't just take my word for it. Look at Data Cloud. Data Cloud itself is growing rapidly, and there's a need for these integrations and connections. Just to give you a context of some of the scale, right? There are 269 different data sources that are currently supported in Data Cloud 143 of those are already generally available, with another 118 in sort of a beta and a preview phase that are coming very, very quickly. And these integrations, vary from application integrations to fetch content and metadata, all the way to large aggregations and connections of data to data lake systems, data warehousing systems, CRM systems that are within the Salesforce cloud, as well as other clouds, and trying to kind of marry them together. And this is an area that is just growing. So something, to kind of maybe read the tea leaves is to also look at where the players are, what connections they're offering, and to let you know that this is really a major transformation happening in the industry, and all of the major players, not just Salesforce, but Adobe, Microsoft, Google, Amazon, everybody is involved, and even the new scrappy startups that are, launching their first solution out there on the market are looking at integration as a way to really scale up and tell a better together story with a lot of our big hyperscaler platforms. And the main reason this is happening, right, is it's really important to meet people where they work. So data sources aren't just sitting in our CRM. They're not just sitting in a Confluence page, a SharePoint page, a Google workspace site. It's all over the place. It's on the public internet. It's on internal systems. You might have some data in your Microsoft Dataverse, some in your Snowflake, some in your data cloud, and everywhere. And one of the main reasons this is happening is people are looking for purpose-based or persona-based experiences. As a seller, I might want to use a Salesforce agent and get things done. As somebody who's in BI, maybe I need to use a co-pilot from another application and view that data in a Power BI dashboard, even though the internal data might all still be stored inside of Salesforce, or it's shared between Salesforce and Dynamics, whatever it might be. And it might sound crazy, but I've talked to customers, many customers, who have very different reasons, and it could just be down to the way things were done, that that kind of excuse that people have. But there are also very valid reasons. There are user experiences, there's localization, there are features that you just can't get elsewhere. And so no matter what the reason might be, you need this ability to deliver a tailored experience. So while some people might be sitting in Tableau and Salesforce, you're going to have other users that are still trying to use Power BI, their Office applications, and other experiences that they're used to working in their day to day. And even if we're trying to collaborate on the same core data set, we might need different experiences. We might have different devices. We might have different localizations, whatever it might be. And, I've talked to folks who have their call center in Dynamics, their CRM and their customer success is in Salesforce, and then their collaboration is in Microsoft Office and Google Workspace. And so while it's important to meet people where they work and understand the rewards, it's going to also be important to understand the challenges. But let's look at kind of an example of when everything goes well. Right. I like starting with the good news. This information comes from a session that is available on Salesforce Plus. It was a great conversation that happened at Dreamforce. I talk about this in a lot greater detail in other presentations, and you can watch the whole session, right from the CEO's mouth, as well on Salesforce Plus. But at the end of the day, when all of this data comes together in the right way, it can do amazing things. And I think one of the great examples here is FedEx identified the risks of not having enough information from internal and external systems, particularly regarding disasters, weather events, and things like that. And what would typically have in the past cost them, potentially $300 million in lost revenue, change fees, and things like that, rerouting, due to things like snowstorms, right? And they had one particular incident in Memphis that was pretty troublesome. The next time that stuff happened and they were able to merge their climate data, their supply chain data, and everything into one system, the next time a storm happened, they were actually able to proactively reroute 2 million packages, 600,000 tons of freight during that next storm and avoid such a cost or a catastrophe for the organization. And this is obviously going to have, amazing returns, not just for this one incident, but for many. So we have data in different systems. There's technology like Data Cloud that's bringing this stuff together. And when it comes together, it can tell a beautiful, beautiful story. But complex supply chains do come with risks. And we need to think about how we integrate these things, and how we avoid pitfalls so we can just worry about the rewards and not worry about the risks. One of the first and biggest risks I'd like to call out is unstructured data. So when we look at our CRM, when we look at our ticketing systems and all that, when we look at our data lakes, a lot of this stuff is very simple data. It's structured data. The relationships aren't as complex. The metadata isn't all over the place. And it's easily accessible and readable by applications, APIs, and reports. Unstructured data, the brochures that we create to meet our customers and our audiences, the conversations that are happening, the creative and collaborative processes, the workflows that are tracking them, the conversations when they stop being a support case or a ticket in Salesforce, where do they go? Does it become an email? Does it become a chat? Do we still have visibility into that data, and can we view it as a single, kind of holistic, through a single holistic lens? And a lot of times we get caught up in things like CRM and customer success, which is important. We sometimes forget the kind of the more business critical or necessary documents that are just there for the day to day, or legal documents or MSAs or contracts. And also this new world of user created apps and data. We live in a low code, no code world. We have citizen developers. People are bringing in their own devices. People are using public data sets. And solutions like Google Workspace and Microsoft 365, these are very popular collaboration platforms. Your conversations and your data exist across all of these different apps, but that's just the beginning. People have all kinds of other ways of solving this problem. They have all kinds of SaaS applications, homebrew solutions, and things like that. So maybe we're not using Teams, we're using Slack. Maybe we're not using Azure, we're using AWS or GCP. Maybe we're, using ServiceNow and other solutions. There are hundreds and thousands of different tools, widgets, integrations that people bring together. So how do we make sense of all of this? And the most important thing is we need to really remember that while we might be sitting in Salesforce, while we might be sitting in these, structured and wonderful data systems, that the enterprise, the organization's data consists of both this structured, that's easier to manage data, and this unstructured data that's sitting out there, but is tied to this entire process. And at the end of the day, this is what really starts to break down the conversation from just evaluating AI readiness and the kind of the blocker to that AI confidence that folks have. So people are worried about the accuracy of outputs and the insights. They don't want hallucinations. People are afraid of data leakage. Do we want somebody to see this draft contract and pricing and documentation? Is our competitive information supposed to be something that a chatbot can access? Is our chatbot accidentally referencing out of date, customer warranty information or whatever it might be? And as we kind of try to adapt or engineer ourselves to avoid these things, we start adopting complicated and rigid rules. And a lot of times we get stuck in the pilot phase of a co-pilot, an agent rollout, right? And a generative AI rollout of a new model in our system. when we really want to get to that level of AI confidence where we can discover productivity boosts within our workforce. We can unleash these folks to be able to get a little bit more creative and create custom experiences, custom scripts, custom talk tracks, whatever it might be, for their specific customers and audiences, and do this with confidence because the data has, a high level of quality, a high level of trust that really kind of takes you from that pilot phase to the workforce empowerment. And there are a number of solutions out there on the market that solve data security problems, that solve data sanitization problems, that solve data backup and recovery problems, API solutions. But one of the things is we have to really think when we introduce these other third party solutions into our supply chain. So, one of the things is that 62% of SMBs were not just impacted by a ransomware attack, but a ransomware attack that originated from a third party provider on their supply chain. And when ransomware hits you, not only does it hit your organization, but it's gotten really smart and clever. So what it'll try and do is it'll try and target your backups first. It'll try and target critical production systems, or it'll install itself in a silent way and then wait to propagate through all of your systems on-prem and in the cloud. And the other problem is we don't have time to wait for our vendors to react. Sometimes we can't afford that, or we definitely can't afford vendors that require us to go through constant maintenance, patching of our systems, and things like that. And a recent survey from Mandiant actually found that 70% of the successfully exploited vulnerabilities came from 0-day threats. So the amount of time you have to respond is very, very small. And if you're worrying about Patch Tuesday or having to come into the office or remote in and do patches on Thursday when a new vulnerability is announced in your vendor, this can be a huge problem. Not only is it a waste of your time, but it might already be too late because the bad guys knew this was happening before you did. And the worst thing you can do is have an unreliable partner that changes their support or removes support for APIs and contracts and things like that, and really leaves you vulnerable. And, I'm just mentioning a few of the more recent things that have happened in the news. The CrowdStrike incident that was taking down Windows-based systems, the SolarWinds incident that allowed attackers to manipulate agents and deploy malicious code or execute malicious functions on endpoints. And even when we look at attacks like what happened to the NHS, we start to learn that, well, the NHS did everything that they were supposed to do. They had good policies and process in place, but the vulnerability and the breach came from somewhere on their supply chain. And so we have to think about these risks. We have to make sure that we understand our vendors and our strategy accommodate for this. So how do we maximize that user experience? How do we maximize that ROI and value while also minimizing the risk? And of course, this is not meant to be like a complete list of recommendations, but here are some obvious ones, right? First of all, if we want to get data into the user's hands faster, the way we do that is by avoiding costly migrations, costly data merges, data transformations, and things like that. The zero copy idea that Salesforce has with Data Cloud is brilliant. Let the data sit where it resides. Those systems have been collecting the data for a long time. It's structured in a way that makes sense. It's tied to other business critical applications we might not even know about. And the challenge of building new integrations is even more difficult, where we don't want to have to build a custom connector to a different data source. We don't want to have to maintain that when there are API updates on one end or the other, or there's a schema change in one place. And we definitely don't want to have to go through lengthy data transformations and then having to manually audit and validate data before people can even use it. So if you can, leave the data where it is, try and use technology like zero copy from Data Cloud and connect to it and expose that to your end users rather than having to go through costly projects that come with their own set of risks and challenges. Maintenance alone can become a nightmare. You end up having entire teams, FTEs that are dedicated to this experience and then end up doing nothing else like adding value to the organization. There are many old school, kind of legacy architectures. If you're buying solutions and they say that they have agents that you have to install on endpoints or in the cloud, try to avoid that at all costs unless there's a very good reason. Agents always have very, very sensitive access to subsystems, whether those are APIs or on endpoints, things like the kernel. And they can be used to either they can be exploited to deploy attacks into your network, or if they have a fault of their own, they can bring systems down. And if those systems are based on things like legacy Windows based appliances, they're going to be even more vulnerable. The last thing you want is your production system to go down and then realize the issue that affected it also affected your failover system and applications. And just avoid vendors that require manual patching. We live in a cloud first world, a SaaS world. These legacy architectures should just be abandoned and left behind. If we're sitting in Salesforce, if we're sitting in Microsoft 365, if we're living in Google Workspace and things like that, why are we managing on-prem or hybrid legacy infrastructure in order to protect, manage, or monitor those environments? At the end of the day, everything should be cloud native. We get a ton of benefits from that. On top of that, you should look for solutions or vendors that provide multiple fixes, that aren't just niche players that only do data security posture management, who only do data protection and resilience. There's a lot more management involved in maintaining multiple solutions. You have to spend a lot more time onboarding technicians, a lot more time documenting things, a lot of gaps in integrations or not having that dedicated support person. And at the end of the day, it even just comes down to dollars, right? Having a single vendor allows you to take advantage of things like bundling and all that to, not only buy down the risk, but buy it at a much, much cheaper price. And so what is our approach, to this problem, right? And AvePoint's approach, and something that we're very excited to do throughout 2025 is to go beyond a single cloud, is to go beyond a single set of solutions and really take this platform-based approach. Because at the end of the day, that's what you need. You don't just need a point solution that's protecting data sitting in a single place. You don't just need governance of access and all of that in a single location. You need it holistically across the board. And when we look at Salesforce specifically, that's where we'll start. The top 5 business challenges Salesforce IT leaders have and kind of agree on, right, are the security threats, the lack of data harmonization, the difficulty ensuring that there's accurate and quality data, budget constraints, as we were talking about, and sometimes there's challenges migrating data architectures. It's just not going to happen. This system is too deeply connected, to something else, or it's an experience that our folks in the field rely on and is business critical. We're just not going to make that change. And at the end of the day, what that means is 95% of organizations end up with a data protection challenge of some kind. When it comes to data loss incidents and data recovery incidents, organizations are unable to recover using their current data protection strategy, often because they're using legacy technology or have legacy strategies for protecting their data. And this starts to add up because if you're looking at things like cyber insurance, if you're looking at things like passing audits and going through your getting your certifications and things like that, or just meeting the underwriter requirements for your cyber insurance vendor. 56% of organizations struggle to meet these security and compliance requirements. Um, and if you are, focused on new innovations and going all out with AI, 86% of Salesforce data and IT leaders agree that the AI outputs are only going to be as good as their data inputs. And so you don't want garbage data, and you don't have to be an organization. You don't want to have to be an organization that has unplanned downtime and the lack of availability of your applications, sometimes for a day or more, especially if they're business critical like Salesforce. And so at the end of the day, what we've become, and what we offer as our platform, is that we want to be your data's defense system, regardless of where in the SaaS world that data resides. So at the end of the day, our confidence platform now supports Microsoft 365, Salesforce, and Google Workspace. We also have data protection solutions for IaaS and PaaS workloads, with plenty of other SaaS applications and other cloud workloads on our roadmap. But at the end of the day, what we do is consistent. Regardless of what cloud you're in, when a user creates a document, creates a record, whether that's done by a person, generative AI assistant, or it's done through a data migration or import, right? Maybe a data loader job, maybe a migration using a third party tool, maybe it's just an upload by a user, whatever it might be. When that data comes in, we automatically identify that new data, classify that data and its sensitivity, and then apply the appropriate protection plan to it. Once that protection is in place, we constantly monitor and optimize our policies. Sensitive data could have been entered into a record that didn't exist there before. Maybe there wasn't any PII there. A document might have been in a draft state and now it's in a published state, or it's now customer facing. Or we've had updates to an important safety document or new contract terms or price sheets, whatever it might be. Sensitivity changes, business value changes, the importance of that content, the risk level of that content is constantly changing as people work with that data, manipulate that data, pass it through an app. And so we have machine learning that's constantly sitting there, and it is looking for these changes and saying, hey, there's been an update. It's time to protect this more aggressively. It's time to protect this less aggressively. Or as we apply and monitor the information lifecycle policies, it becomes time to defensively destroy that data. Whether we want to just simply optimize the storage and reduce our storage costs in Salesforce, and SharePoint Online and other places in the cloud, or if we want to completely remove that data from Salesforce and other SaaS systems, we can do that as well. Delete the records, delete the attachments, or move them into offline storage. And when we're doing this, we're not just applying this lifecycle policy to Salesforce, but we're doing it across all of your cloud environments that we manage. So if a customer contract has expired, we're going to remove that customer information that could be sitting in a OneDrive somewhere. We're going to remove those records that are sitting within your Salesforce environment, the attached work orders that are sitting in that environment, and then even go into the backups. And in order to satisfy things like GDPR and other regulations, delete that data from the backups as well, so that you are fully compliant with any regulations that your organization is required to meet. And at the end of the day, you want to know where the value is. Where is this new data being generated? Who is interacting with it? Who has access to it? Are they sharing too much or too little? Are they not able to reach the right audience? And then if we do identify a place of high traffic, high value workload, high value data, that we then kind of bring this all full circle and back and say, maybe it's time for a more aggressive retention policy. Maybe it's time to store 5 copies of this data instead of 2 copies or 3 copies of this data, whatever your policies might be. And then to encourage responsible collaboration. So whether they're working with internal or external teams, whether they're using Google Drive or OneDrive, or you have documents that you're sharing outside of Salesforce directly with your customers through a support case, all of this is managed in a single kind of pane of glass experience. And we can do things like get very granular. Who had access to this data? Who had access to this record? When did they make a change? Did they share this with an external party? Is it time to expire or eliminate those risky sharing links, regardless of what SaaS platform they were in? And when it comes to collaborating, let's help companies create secure data rooms so that they can collaborate responsibly with partners that they're working on a contract with, vendors that they're working on, building accessories with and partnering with, or consultants that they're working on a project with. Whatever it might be, we want to enable that. And all of this stuff is available as a set of layered solutions in our single platform. All of these components talk to one another and feed back into one another. And just to give you an example, when we look at something like data protection, you really want to think about how many different cloud workloads you have, what combination of technologies that you're using, and ensure that you have a vendor that's not just going to protect Salesforce, that's not just going to protect Microsoft or just your emails, but is going to protect all of your cloud investment, regardless of which cloud it sits in and how your technology stack is distributed. And to give you an example, this is a customer that works in the payments industry. They are a financial services customer. So, of course, they're dealing with highly regulated data. Folks are worried about things like FINRA compliance, SOX compliance. This data has to be stored in immutable, independent backup copies. They want them to be air gapped to have that extra level of confidence so that they can meet their retention and compliance requirements. But at the same time, the last thing you want to do is back up a bunch of data and spend money on storage that's basically just a paperweight. Or worse yet, you're retaining the data that's a risk. And so what we were able to do is combine our Microsoft protection, our Salesforce protection, our Power Platform protection, and bundle those things together along with our storage optimization and archiving capabilities to actually eliminate 15 terabytes of junk data, reducing that customer's cost. And by bundling all of their data protection and resilience solutions, we were able to achieve a 25% cost reduction. And at the end of the day, not only were we able to meet this client's requirements, but we only had to go through one set of security reviews, one set of procurement, and we were able to make the Microsoft 365 operations team, the Salesforce admin and developer team, as well as the Power Platform and user experience teams at this organization, all happy and all confident that they could work together. They could get their data back, whether they lost it in an email or in a Salesforce record somewhere, or it was a problem sitting somewhere in their Power Platform or in one of their app experiences. And they're able to, if they ever have a problem, pick up the phone and call a single vendor. And one of the things that's important, all of those risks and things like that that I was talking about before, that's all something that we consider in our platform kind of just as table stakes. We have 14 global data centers around the world. We've achieved FedRAMP compliance for moderate impact workloads, and we have customers deployed in Salesforce and Microsoft and Google deployments in our FedRAMP instance. Those same design principles, the same code is deployed in all of our other data center regions around the world where we regularly meet ISO 27001, the newest 2022 standard, our SOC 2, and we are regularly certified by a third party where we go through penetration testing, application testing. All of our solutions are entirely cloud native. So you're not doing things like patching. You're not waking up tomorrow and wondering if you're compromised or not. We are completely isolated from you in a way that many other vendors are not. And what this means is if there's a breach on your end and there's ransomware or a compromise on your network, a problem with Entra ID, whatever it might be, business email compromise, that's not going to leak into AvePoint and affect your backup copies. It's not going to affect your archive data. It's not going to affect the application state and bring it down so that you can't access your data while things are offline. And of course, no one is perfect. If for whatever reason an incident impacts AvePoint, this level of isolation goes both ways. That ransomware will not go into your network. And if your backups are compromised, your production environment is also not going to just be compromised because we were sitting on the network, we were an appliance, we had an agent behind your firewall. Things like that just don't happen with cloud native solutions like ours. And, don't just take our word for it. We've been Microsoft Partner of the Year 6 times in a row. We are a select Salesforce partner as part of the Grow program, and we've been recognized in G2 multiple times for customer support and success. And we are localized in most regions around the world and able to provide local support in your language with boots on the ground in your backyard. And if you're wondering what kind of company we keep, you may already be on this list. This is just a handful of organizations that we work with across a number of verticals. They all have, business critical data, high risk, high sensitivity data. They service clientele that have very, very high demands for performance, for sensitivity, for compliance, trust. And at the end of the day, these organizations trust us to help them manage and protect their data. So if you're in this family, you might not even know it. We might be protecting your Microsoft environment. And, you might realize that you could use us for Salesforce protection, or vice versa. You might be using us for Salesforce protection and not know that we do Google Workspace or Azure or AWS. And if you're interested in hearing about any of those solutions, please reach out to us. And of course, check us out on the App Exchange as well. Our data recovery solution is listed there, and we'd love to have a conversation with you about our confidence platform and some of the other solutions I talked about that are available today and being improved throughout 2025 next year in our robust R&D roadmap. So with that being said, I'd love to jump into a Q&A. Hear what's going on, from our audience. Are you struggling with being in a multi-cloud world? Are you kind of reevaluating your supply chain? Or are you just curious about things? Let's hear it. Let's share it with the community, and hopefully I can give you guys some good tidbits too.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Shyam. If you want to flick back to the previous slide, and we can just leave that on for a couple of minutes. Everyone in the audience, we are moving into the Q&A. So if you do have any questions for Shyam, then do pop them in the comment section of LinkedIn or YouTube, wherever it is you're tuning in from, and we'll try and get around to them. We did have a couple of questions that came through. The first one, they said, it's pretty complicated to decide what is and isn't important. How can we make the case internally for keeping something or not?
Yeah, I think the first thing someone will say is, we've always done something this way, and because of that, we need to hang on to this system. But at the end of the day, I think the best way to identify whether you need to keep something or not is to point out exactly what it does and identify if it can uniquely do something that cannot be done in another platform. And a lot of people say, well, we'll have to do a data migration, or well, we might need to rebuild some of our macros or whatever it might be. But at the end of the day, that value that that system provides needs to be measured in some way. Who is it? Who is it used by? Is it the number of tickets that it processes, the number of customers that rely on it, the operational costs of running that system? And then even if there is a data migration or something like that that has to be done, factor in the cost of that. And then, just from a cost perspective, a lot of these arguments can be made. But more importantly, um, you may discover what is business critical. And you might suddenly say, oh my God, wow, this system that our customer success team uses doesn't really have a rival out there, or it has so much proprietary code or customizations that we need that it is absolutely mission critical. So you may be looking at something to eliminate and identify that it's a tier one asset, and you can get additional resources in place. Maybe all it takes is a little bit of additional funding to unlock some new premium features to get more value out of it. But at the end of the day, long story short, um, define clearly what the application does, what value it provides, and try to quantify it. And then at the end of the day, if another system can beat that, it becomes a no-brainer, and you just have to overcome that inertia of, we did it this way. It's going to take 6 months to migrate. But after 6 months, if you save $1 million every year, it's probably worth that project, right? So that's what I would leave it at there.
Amazing. Thank you. Some great advice there. I'll bring the slides down now as well, but the link to check AvePoint out on the App Exchange is still in the chat if you would like to check them out. Another question we've got here is, we don't own some of the systems we want to change or connect to. How can you make that case internally?
Yeah. So this is one of those things where we are the Salesforce team and we need access to this data, or we are the customer success team and we don't quite have access to the same data that sales does, or that product marketing does, or whoever else it might be. And if we married that data together, we could benefit greatly from it. Or we just can't get that person on the team, my counterpart or whoever, to be invested in it, because we all have different priorities. At the end of the day, I think what's really important is to identify what your organization's biggest goals are. And there's always going to be something, right? Whether you're a growth oriented company and you're going to be heavily pursuing ARR growth next year, whether one of your major themes next year is customer retention, or becoming more secure, or lowering operational costs. There's always something that is kind of top of mind to the executive and leadership teams. And folks are usually talking about it around the table all the time. And so the first thing I'd say you do is identify what that big thing is. Are we trying to do more with less and reduce budgets by 15%? Are we trying to identify what we can do to improve customer response, support ticket response times, or whatever it might be? Find those high level themes, because those are typically tied to a director level, a VP level, potentially even at the C-suite level, and frame the problem that you're trying to solve not just as something that will help you work together with your counterpart or will help you get something done, but how you can align it specifically to that. So, oh my God, if we integrated these two systems together, we could eliminate 5 steps from the customer support process. Or if it's not 5 workflow steps, maybe it's, response time by 24 hours or whatever it might be. Or by eliminating this system, it will help in our consolidation efforts by saving us 3 million every over the course of the next 3 years or whatever it might be. And then present that argument, to that person's leadership. And of course, you don't want to just step over somebody's head. So maybe kind of serve it up as a platter to that other stakeholder. Hey, I know your boss, really cares about this, or your boss's boss really cares about this. This could be a mutual win if we connect that Splunk data to the data that we have here in CRM, or if we eliminate that legacy vendor and have you guys come over and we start using Einstein here in Salesforce. Whatever those things might be, try to tie it to something that is an initiative a layer above that person. And this allows them to then not only say, yeah, I want to work with you, but hey, you're doing something that's going to make me look good in front of my boss, or that is going to help the company. And that will usually get you more buy-in. It'll get you more stakeholders. It'll give you more visibility, and ideally priority over the day-to-day tasks that are always going to keep coming in. There's always a fire. There's always something that's priority one. But this argument will allow you to take something that you want to do and make it a project, or a higher priority over other things that might be getting in the way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I think that this is the last question for now. If we use your technology, then you are a part of our supply chain too. So what makes you different?
Yeah. So at the end of the day, it comes down to how you evaluate your vendors. And there have been, for example, in the UK, there are new cybersecurity frameworks that are adding more controls and more rigor in place for evaluating a software vendor. There are security frameworks in the EU. I think it's Essential 8 in Australia. Obviously, here in the United States, there are a number of different frameworks that are being passed and updated. And at the end of the day, these requirements are just the baseline in evaluating a vendor. You should ask a vendor, how are they improving security? Not only should a vendor be able to tell you, hey, in the last 6 months we launched these 6 new features, but we added these zero trust capabilities, we added these new data center regions, we added this additional level of encryption, we added these additional approval workflows and second stage approvals for admin functions and things like that. So make sure that when you evaluate a vendor, including us, right, that we tell you about what security improvements we're making, what security innovations we have planned on our roadmap as well. The vendor should be able to explain that to you. Look for a vendor that can guarantee you independence, right? We've been around since 2001 now. And so you want to look for vendors that have been in the space for a while, that have worked with other enterprise customers, that kind of understand the risks that are involved in not just being a vendor and a supplier, but being a partner, right? And being able to advise you on your Salesforce implementation, your SharePoint implementation, your Gemini implementation, and actually just add value and not just be a piece of software that ticks a box somewhere, that keeps your boss happy or that meets a certain requirement. And at the end of the day, the other thing I'd say is look at how we're built. We are built cloud native. We are built to be isolated and compartmentalized from your other systems. And at the end of the day, you want a vendor that's honest. We're not. No one's perfect. Things are going to go wrong, but it's how does that vendor react when something goes wrong? You can look at, for example, the way we do disclosures. and we notify customers of incidents that might even be tangential to us, right? Luckily, knock on wood, we haven't had to make any disclosures of our own, but when partner solutions, when underlying technologies in the stack, suffer breaches, we evaluate what that means for us, how that could potentially impact our customers, and then we notify our customers. And we ensure that our customers don't have to do silly things like run patches and updates and all that, just to kind of minimize and again buy down that risk. So when you're evaluating a vendor, one of the evaluation criteria is, by adding you to my supply chain, how do you reduce risk? If you only add risk, and that risk is not outweighed by the incredible value that you provide, then maybe we need to reconsider and shop around a little bit more. So yeah, completely honest there.
Amazing. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Shyam. That was the last question that we have. So I am happy to wrap up the session now.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and also for going through all of this with us. And thanks everyone in the audience as well for tuning in as well. If you are curious to learn more about AvePoint, then do check them out on the App Exchange. The link is in LinkedIn and also on YouTube as well. But other than that, I hope you've enjoyed today's session and have a wonderful rest of the day. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye, everybody.